One of the things that makes MCCDC unique is that this is a congregation where we are not told what to do by bishops, and there's not these powers on high that come and tell us where to move and how to move. In fact, this is a congregation that has a congregational structure, which means that everybody has a voice. We also believe very much that the glory of God is in each one of us, and that the voice of God is in each one of us. And I would be doing a disservice to the congregation if I ever thought that my voice was the only voice that mattered. Your voices matter. Your voices make a difference. And so from time to time, we have a special Sunday where we invite the powerful and prophetic voices from our laity to speak and to share their voices. And today, as part of Black History Month, we are honored to have three powerful prophetic voices sharing with us today. I want to thank each of you for stepping forward. They say that the scariest thing to do and the number one fear is public speaking, and all of you have agreed to offer yourselves today and to share reflections from the soul. And to help support you and encourage you, the congregation at this time will welcome you, Joanna Hardy, Kathy Batson, and Tuan Samuel. Let us thank them for stepping forward.
To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. When I read the 25th Psalm, I kept going back to this first verse. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. So I did some research in preparation for today, and some of the things that I found were the Hebrew word nephesh means a lot of different things, but here it's translated into soul. But other meanings include life and breath. And in today's understanding of the word soul, I think a lot of us don't really think about how you would define it. I think sometimes we think it's something separate from our whole selves, something that does not include our imperfections. But the Hebrew word nephesh really means much more than that. It is the very it's the very breath that gives us life. It really means all of ourselves. It really means everything that makes us us, including our imperfections. It is also interesting that the psalmist here, that many believe is David, writes this psalm as something called an acrostic poem, one in which each verse of this psalm begins in order with a letter from the Hebrew alphabet. And so the first verse starts with Aleph. Some teachings describe Aleph as a symbol of God's connectedness and oneness with us. So it's interesting that this psalmist, David, calls out to God, to you, O Lord, I lift up my soul, my life, my entire being. He begins with Aleph, a symbol that bridges that gap between us and God. But as I stated in the beginning, when I read Psalm 25, I just couldn't get past this first verse. I think I struggled to get beyond the first verse because it implies a complete openness or surrender to God. Is a statement of exposure and offering all of ourselves, including our flaws, to God. It also requires removing barriers to praising God. What are your barriers to lifting up your life, your soul, to God? I struggled with this question and thought about what barriers there are in my life that might prevent me from lifting up my soul. 7.5 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. The cancer had reoccurred, and frankly, we were upset because she religiously went to her doctors, yet it wasn't caught sooner. That time started a 4-year roller coaster of sorts. Chemotherapy working and not working, infections and operations, 3 strokes and rehabilitations, keeping up with prescriptions and doctor's appointments. We were regular visitors to the emergency room. In fact, my mom managed to be admitted to every single wing of the local hospital. Having already lost my father, I struggled. And I still struggle. Why? Why did this happen? I've been angry, sad, and numb. But in this, I almost missed seeing the blessings. The blessing of the time that I did have with my parents, still finding times to have fun and finding humor even during that time, and my mom being able to give away my sister at her wedding and see her first grandchild and at least know a second was coming. It has been 3.5 years since I stood by my mother's bed in the intensive care unit and watched her pass away. Machines buzzing and beeping, it feels like it was yesterday. But this experience taught me it is easy to put up barriers. Fully opening oneself even to God can be difficult. I know for me, I think, how can I open myself up to God when I'm still angry? But then I realize, how can I stop being angry without opening myself up to God? What this first verse of this psalm reminds us is, no one is perfect and God knows it. We must be open to lifting ourselves up, our whole selves up to God, to be open to God's healing. And even David was not perfect. And in other psalms, he clearly asked the question, why? But despite his imperfections and his questions, he did fully and truly open himself up to God and was able to proclaim, to you, O Lord, I lift up my soul.
Good morning. I just want to take a minute just to let the Spirit just fill my soul right now, and also to thank you for being open to my soul. When Pastor Dwayne asked me to speak, I immediately said yes. He told me he would let me know what the scripture would be. In the meantime, I wondered what would I feel comfortable sharing in front of everyone. Well, when I found out that the message for today was Reflections from the Soul, I absolutely knew with every being of my soul, with every soul of my being, every cell of my being, that this was no mistake. I was just where I was supposed to be, sharing myself in front of you and in front of God. This scripture talks about trust. Trust that God will show you the path. But not just a path, but the right path. I started the new year in prayer and reflection. January 1st was my birthday, and I promised myself, as well as God, that I would honor my truth in 2012. 2011 was a challenging year for me. I have a very demanding job, one that challenges me in many areas. I had to let go of a house that my now deceased partner and I bought in Delaware, and a house that I truly loved. My beautiful wife, Terry, and I challenged ourselves to grow in numerous ways. And to top it all off, I perceived this church as changing. And I felt an internal struggle. I asked God to please show me the way. Please, God, show me the light. Show me my truth. I knew and I felt in my spirit that 2012 was going to be a year of growth, a year of change for me. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. My parents were strict disciplinarians, particularly my father. They were very hard workers, and they expected everybody in the house to work. My father used to say, when my feet hit the floor, everybody's feet gonna hit the floor. One thing for certain, you are not going to lounge, or you are not going to sleep in in Lou Batson's house. As an adult, I found it very difficult to relax or have leisure time without feeling guilty. I would busy myself to the point of exhaustion, overcommit myself. Oftentimes, that would leave me feeling resentful. I sometimes found myself saying yes when everything in me was shouting no. By the time my wife and I showed up at MCC, I was spiritually floundering. It was here I found a way to connect to God. It was here that I learned how to stop and listen to the voice of God. Well, recently, I have felt a spiritual disconnect. I've been feeling once again as though I've been floundering. I've been questioning whether or not God is here in my heart. I've been questioning whether or not God is here in this church. I've allowed people, situations, to define what my praise and spirituality should look like and what it means to me. I shared what I perceived as my struggle with Reverend Dwayne. I shared how I felt as though God had been silent, had even drifted away from me. His response was simple, but one that gave me reason to pause. In essence, he asked, if I felt disconnected from God, who moved? He reminded me that God is always with you. He never moves, particularly when you're feeling alone, when you feel confused, when you question your faith. I am standing now here before you, knowing, trusting, even believing that God has a plan for me. He's not finished with me, not yet. God is right here. God is touching my heart. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I feel that He's here. And He is telling me to believe. I am truly aware today that not only did I make a commitment to honor my truth in the new year, but God is standing here, supporting me, encouraging me to not only honor my truth, but to live my truth. God is telling me right now, at this moment, that my commitment to self is and has always been His commitment to me. Thank you. Amen.
Good morning. I want to thank Pastor Dwayne for the opportunity to share a little bit of my story. I don't often have opportunities to talk about it in this type of setting or to make the application to something spiritual, so I appreciate that opportunity. And I too, when I read the scripture, I automatically saw it as a song of exaltation, of praise. It was a statement of faith. And the thing that I went to first was adversity, because that has been a constant struggle in my own spiritual walk, is coming to terms with adversity and our imperfections and learning how to deal with the imperfections in others, and how through the good times and bad you have to always rely on God. It's easy to hold true to that faith when there's nothing bad going on, but it's more difficult when you have challenges. And so that has been at the crux of my struggle. I remember earlier in my childhood, I thought that if I prayed and I studied hard and I didn't get into any trouble, that I could escape adversity and basically the human condition. And I've come to find out that none of us can do that. And the personal story that I can share today, there's since been many things that I could share. Has been a difficult challenge, but the first difficulty that still inspires me today was something that happened to me when I was much younger, and I'm recalling it as it was told to me by my mother. When I was younger, I had a seizure, and I was told it was a normal day. We were getting ready for school, she was getting ready for work, and there was nothing to indicate that something earth-shattering was about to happen that day. And my eyes began to shoot into the back of my head, and I began to convulse, and the life began to leave my body, and I was having a seizure. And my parents called the paramedics, and I went into cardiac arrest 3 times. And I've been told that, but I never really was able to appreciate that. But I guess I was as close to death as you could be 3 times. And my mother had to watch that. And so, yes, I went into cardiac arrest 3 times. I was rushed to the hospital, and obviously I survived. And since then, my mother has always told me, she's told me routinely for years, that she believes that I survived because I have a purpose and God has a plan for me. And I hold true to that. And I remember when I came out of my coma, I would liken it to if you were about to drown and you were submerged underwater and you're struggling to reach the top of the surface, and you get there and you just take a deep breath and you just jump up. And so I remember the first people that I saw was my aunt and my sister. My legs were atrophied, so I couldn't walk. And I was hooked up to all these machines. I had an IV, and I think it was sort of like a second birth, a second chance. And I was also told during this time that when I was coming in and out of consciousness, I would refer to another little boy. I was asking my mother, well, what happened to the other little boy who was sick? And so I don't know anything about what happens when you're in between, in and out of it. But when I did wake up, it did feel like everything that had happened before that point was someone else's life. That I was sort of disoriented. I was like, well, was that my childhood? Was that me? Or, and what happens now? The doctors had told my parents that I would have some learning disabilities, and sure enough, I was sick and in and out of the hospital for many years. I struggled with asthma. I wasn't entirely athletic, but today I run 4 or 5 miles each morning, and I didn't have any learning disabilities. And every time I run, I think about what God is able to get you through if you hold true to faith and never waver and never let go. That we can't escape adversity, but He'll get you through it. So when I run, I think about what I've come from and what lay ahead, and that whatever lays ahead, God will be with me. And so, in oratory, you're supposed to end where you begin, right? So adversity is, to me, has been the weight resistance that has strengthened my faith. Adversity has been the weight resistance that has made me a stronger person. And I'll end with a quote that I recently heard from Jane Fonda, and I would make the application too to my own spiritual journey. In the same way that you work out, when you're building muscles, you destroy the tissue around in that area, and then you do repetitions and you build muscle in those areas. So too If adversity is the weight resistance that strengthens our faith, if any of us allow ourselves, we can become stronger in the very places that we've been broken. This battle is not over for me, and I continue to struggle with it. But I'm working it out every day. And hopefully someday, well, I guess it never stops. And that's the peace that I've come to. That's the peace that I have now. That whatever come ahead, whatever lay ahead, God will be with me.
Thanks to each of you for sharing from your souls and for being so real today. And I think that each of you gives all of us something that I think we can hold on to in our faith, and some powerful spiritual direction and encouragement. So thank you so much.